Sherlock Holmes received the first report of the baffling theft on a brisk morning when a trusted inspector of Scotland Yard informed him that yet another high-profile robbery had taken place. The report detailed that an invaluable artifact had vanished from the private collection of a wealthy patron. Holmes read the report with a keen intensity, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed every word. He said, "There is a method in this madness, Watson. Notice how the thief leaves not a trace except the ghost of his presence." Dr. Watson, ever the steadfast companion, replied, "Indeed, Holmes. It appears that every theft of late is executed with an elegance that belies the criminality of the act." Watson's tone was laced with a mix of admiration and apprehension. The case promised to be a conundrum unlike any they had previously encountered. In the days that followed, Scotland Yard was thrown into disarray by a series of similarly daring thefts. Each incident involved the disappearance of objects of immense historical or monetary value from the collections of society's elite. Holmes meticulously pored over the police reports, noting the precision with which each crime was executed. "The thief's modus operandi is consistent," Holmes remarked to Watson during one of their long, reflective walks. "Not a single mark of forced entry is visible, and the security systems are circumvented with a delicacy that suggests intimate knowledge of the inner workings of these establishments." Watson listened intently, his mind abuzz with the possibilities. It is as if the culprit is not a common criminal, but rather someone who possesses the confidence to waltz through society's very gates, he observed. As Holmes and Watson began their investigation, they discovered a curious pattern. The stolen items, though seemingly priceless in their own right, were all owned by individuals whose reputations had grown suspect. Rumours whispered among the corridors of power suggested that some of these affluent collectors had engaged in unethical practices. Holmes said, "It appears that the thief's targets are not chosen at random, but are instead selected from the ranks of those who have exploited their positions for personal gain." Watson nodded, adding, "And one must wonder if the thief's motivations are more than mere greed. Perhaps a darker purpose underlies these meticulously planned heists." The investigation led the duo through a labyrinth of clues. Holmes began by meticulously studying the details of each theft, comparing the time frames, the stolen items, and the backgrounds of the victims. In a moment of revelation, he remarked, "The precision with which our phantom thief executes these operations indicates a mind that is as principled as it is brilliant. It is almost as if the individual intends to serve a purpose beyond the accumulation of wealth." Watson was quick to support this notion, saying, "If that is the case, then we are dealing with a character whose actions might be driven by a moral code that conflicts with the law itself." Holmes' inquiries soon led him to the upper echelons of society, where whispers of a benevolent benefactor began to emerge. A series of charitable donations, made anonymously and coinciding with the timing of the thefts, caught his attention. He noted, "These donations are not the work of an ordinary philanthropist. They occur immediately after each theft, as though the stolen goods are being funneled into a secret reservoir of goodwill." Watson marvelled at the audacity of such a scheme. It is as if the thief is using the spoils of the heists to fund institutions that care for the less fortunate. Perhaps even to support orphanages and the impoverished, he commented, his voice filled with both admiration and concern. Their investigation reached a turning point when Holmes intercepted a coded message intended for an intermediary. The message, written in an intricate cipher known only to those familiar with the intellectual pursuits of the elite, hinted at the next target, a corrupt aristocrat known for his unscrupulous business dealings. Holmes said, "This cipher confirms our suspicions, Watson. The thief is not merely pilfering. He is carefully selecting his targets in order to undermine a network of corruption." Watson responded, "The more I consider it, the more I find myself torn between my duty as a man of the law and my empathy for those who suffer under the weight of greed and exploitation." As the clues converged, the identity of the phantom thief began to take shape. A person who occupied a position of respect and trust within society. This individual, known for his philanthropic endeavors and widely admired for his community leadership, had been seen at various charitable events and social functions. Despite his public image of benevolence, subtle inconsistencies in his past dealings and unexplained financial transactions had caught the attention of a few keen observers. Holmes stated matter-of-factly, "The irony is not lost on me. A man esteemed by society for his generosity is, in truth, the architect of these audacious thefts." Watson felt a pang of disillusionment as he added, "It is a betrayal of the public trust, even if his intentions are aimed at alleviating suffering." In a series of tense exchanges, Holmes and Watson discussed the moral intricacies of their findings. Holmes said, "We find ourselves in a predicament where the thief's actions, though illegal, serve a higher purpose. The stolen goods, instead of lining the pockets of a common criminal, are used to redress the balance of justice for those who have been wronged by the greed of the corrupt." Watson, ever the moral compass, replied, "Yet, Holmes, the law is the foundation of our society. If we allow such transgressions to go unpunished, what message do we send about the sanctity of justice? The end does not always justify the means." Holmes's analytical mind wrestled with the weight of the moral dilemma. He knew that exposing the phantom thief could lead to a scandal that might unravel the carefully woven fabric of society's elite. Yet, at the same time, he could not condone criminal activity, regardless of its underlying motives. In a reflective soliloquy, Holmes mused, "There are times when the boundaries of legality and morality blur, when the pursuit of justice demands a compromise that is as paradoxical as it is necessary. Am I, then, to become judge and arbiter of a justice that lies beyond the pale of the law?" Watson observed quietly, "Holmes, your struggle is not new. Many have grappled with the same conundrum, and history has seldom provided us with clear answers." The investigation took a decisive turn when Holmes arranged a clandestine meeting with a trusted informant who had intimate knowledge of the phantom thief's operations. The informant's testimony was as surprising as it was damning. He explained that the thief had meticulously planned each heist, not for personal gain, but to fund orphanages and provide relief to impoverished communities neglected by the ruling class. The informant said, "The man you seek is driven by a desire to correct the wrongs of our society. Every item he takes is a blow struck against the heart of corruption." Holmes absorbed the words with a mixture of admiration and sorrow, acknowledging that the truth was far more complex than he had imagined. As the pieces of the puzzle began to interlock, Holmes and Watson set a trap for the phantom thief during his next anticipated heist. Their plan was executed with the precision of a well-rehearsed symphony. At the appointed moment, as the thief moved silently to appropriate another prized possession, Holmes and Watson intervened. However, rather than a struggle, they were met with a calm and measured surrender. The thief, whose identity was revealed to be a venerable member of society, stood before them with an expression that was both defiant and resolute. He said, "I have taken what was rightfully stolen from those who would use wealth as a weapon against the needy. I have redirected fortune to those who have none. I understand the law's condemnation, but ask yourself, gentlemen, who is the true criminal?" Holmes regarded the man with a piercing gaze, his mind racing through the implications of the confession. Watson felt his heart heavy with the weight of the revelation. "Your actions, though illegal, have brought aid to those who would otherwise languish in neglect," Watson said softly, his voice trembling with conflicted emotion. The thief replied, "I have merely taken what was already tainted by greed and returned it to those who deserve hope. If my methods are condemned, then perhaps the fault lies with a society that values wealth over humanity." In that charged moment, Holmes found himself at a crossroads. He was the embodiment of the law and the relentless pursuit of truth. Yet here he faced a man whose crimes were committed in the name of justice. Holmes said, "Your explanation, though admirable in its intentions, cannot absolve you of the breach of trust that you have committed. The law must be upheld even when its rigid structure fails to accommodate noble aims." The thief's eyes flickered with both challenge and sorrow as he countered, "And what of the lives saved? What of the children who now have a chance at a future because of the resources I have provided? Is there not a higher law than that of man, one that values the welfare of the innocent above the sanctity of property?" Watson found himself echoing the internal conflict that now beset them both. "Holmes," he said, in a tone that balanced duty with compassion, "we are faced with a paradox. The thief has struck a blow against corruption, yet he has done so by flouting the law. How do we reconcile the letter of the law with the spirit of mercy?" Holmes paused, his mind deep in contemplation, and finally responded, "It is not for us to decide which side of justice is superior, Watson. Our duty is to uncover the truth, however uncomfortable it may be, and to let society determine its course." As the discussion unfolded, the shadow of scandal loomed large. News of the Phantom Thief's arrest spread rapidly through London's social circles, igniting debates about morality, legality, and the responsibilities of those in power. The public, already disillusioned by revelations of widespread corruption among the elite, began to view the thief not as a common criminal, but as a Robin Hood-like figure who had dared to challenge an unjust system. In hushed conversations in drawing rooms and bustling coffee houses alike, whispers emerged that the true crime lay not in the theft itself, but in the systemic exploitation that necessitated such drastic measures. Holmes, however, remained unswayed by public opinion. He said, "The fickle nature of society's sentiment must not dictate our actions. The truth is often cloaked in ambiguity, and while popular opinion may find solace in romanticized narratives, our commitment must remain to the objective pursuit of justice." Watson added, "Yet the human heart cannot help but feel compassion for a man who, despite his transgressions, has alleviated the suffering of so many." The debate between them was emblematic of a broader conflict between the rigid boundaries of law and the complexities of ethical action. In the days that followed, as Scotland Yard prepared to process the arrest, Holmes undertook a series of private investigations aimed at verifying the thief's claims. He interviewed the directors of the orphanages and charities that had benefited from the recovered funds. To his astonishment, the testimonies consistently portrayed a picture of hope and renewal. One benefactor remarked, "The resources provided by this mysterious patron have transformed the lives of countless children. Their future, once bleak and uncertain, now glows with promise." Holmes listened with a mixture of admiration and sorrow, acknowledging that while the methods were illegal, the outcomes were undeniably beneficial. Holmes and Watson then confronted the thief once more, seeking to understand the full scope of his operations. The man explained that his actions were not born of a desire for personal enrichment, but from a profound disillusionment with a system that had long ignored the plight of the vulnerable. He said, "I have walked among the wealthy and witnessed firsthand the callous disregard for those who suffer. I have seen fortunes amassed on the backs of misery and despair. My thefts are a small measure of retribution, a means to reclaim dignity for those stripped of it by greed." Holmes acknowledged the sincerity in the thief's voice, though he remained firm in his belief that the law must not be selectively enforced. In a climactic moment of introspection, Holmes confided in Watson his inner turmoil. He said, "I am torn, Watson. The face of injustice is multifaceted, and sometimes the scales of justice seem to tilt in directions that defy the strictures of law. What if, by exposing him, we only perpetuate a cycle that leaves the innocent bereft of aid?" Watson replied, "It is a conundrum that has plagued humanity since time immemorial. Perhaps the solution lies not in the absolution of one man's crimes, but in the reform of a system that has allowed such disparities to flourish." Their conversation resonated with the weight of ethical quandaries that extended far beyond the immediate case. The ensuing days were marked by intense deliberation among the authorities. Scotland Yard faced mounting pressure from both the public and influential figures who feared that the exposure of the phantom thief's true motives might incite social unrest. A senior inspector stated, "The revelation that our esteemed benefactor has engaged in criminal activities could undermine the very foundation of public trust in our institutions. Amidst these concerns, Holmes persisted in his investigation, determined to illuminate every facet of the case. He said, "The truth is not a matter of convenience or expedience. It is a tapestry woven from the complexities of human nature. We must unravel it, regardless of the consequences." In a final act of defiance against a system mired in corruption, Holmes orchestrated a confidential meeting with the highest echelons of Scotland Yard and government officials. In his address, he laid bare the details of the Phantom Thieves operations and the evidence of his charitable contributions. Holmes said, "I present to you a man who, though he has broken the law, has also mended the wounds inflicted by a corrupt society. His actions compel us to ask, is it not our duty to address the systemic inequities that force individuals into such paradoxical acts?" The room fell silent as officials grappled with the implications of his words. As the debate raged within those hallowed halls of power, the public continued to clamour for justice that transcended simple binaries. Newspapers carried headlines that extolled the virtues of the mysterious benefactor even as they condemned his methods. Amid this tumult, Holmes made a decision that would forever haunt him. He chose to protect the thief's identity, reasoning that exposing him fully would do more harm than good. Watson observed, "Holmes, you have always been a champion of the truth, yet here you risk becoming an arbiter of a morality that defies easy judgment." Holmes replied, "Sometimes, Watson, the pursuit of justice requires us to navigate a labyrinth of contradictions, where the law must yield to a higher understanding of humanity." In the aftermath, the Phantom Thief was quietly released into society, his crimes discreetly expunged from public record, while reforms were gradually set in motion to address the rampant corruption that had plagued the elite. The man continued his covert work, funding orphanages and community centres, his identity remaining a closely guarded secret known only to a few who shared his vision. Watson reflected on the outcome, saying, "The world is seldom black and white, and our actions must sometimes reside in the grey." Holmes, your decision to protect him speaks not of leniency, but of a deeper commitment to justice that recognises the flaws of our institutions. Holmes answered with measured solemnity, "We have witnessed a chapter in which the spirit of benevolence and the strictures of the law collided. Perhaps in time, society will come to understand that true justice is not confined by rigid definitions, but is born of compassion and a willingness to reform." Thus, the tale of the Phantom Thief became a legend whispered among those who sought to challenge the status quo. A reminder that sometimes even the most celebrated figures in society might harbour secrets born of noble intent. In the quiet moments that followed, as Holmes and Watson resumed their pursuit of truth in other mysteries, they carried with them the profound lesson that the path to justice is rarely straightforward, and that the noblest intentions can sometimes be cloaked in the guise of transgression. Watson said, "In our journey through the shadows of human endeavour, we have learned that every act of defiance carries both a cost and a promise." Holmes, ever reflective, responded, "Indeed, Watson. It is our duty to seek out the truth, however painful, and to trust that in the end, the light of reason will prevail over the darkness of corruption." Their reflections echoed in the corridors of time, a testament to the enduring struggle between the letter of the law and the higher call of compassion, a struggle that, in its complexity, defined the very essence of justice.